This is the Perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah!
Everyone wants a successful practice, but the reason yours isn't is because you're lazy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. This is an interesting edition that we actually recorded while doing a LinkedIn live stream. So if we seem unusually uncomfortable or somehow off our game, it's because somehow in our psyche it's different that this is being listened to in real time and not just as a recording with tens of thousands of people.
Well, Jarvis, I'm super excited, though, because just like we do on every Monday morning, it's about doing some hard things, not just exciting things, right? But things that are going to help move the needle and help to be super, super productive, which is kind of about the theme of today's podcast, which is, you know what? If you want a successful practice, stop being lazy. And it's so easy to say that I'm never lazy and I always work because I'm busy. But there's a huge distinction here between busy time and laziness.
Boy, that's an interesting point, right? We almost never, I'm just trying to think if I've ever met an advisor, I'm sure one, but we almost never meet advisors who say, you know what, Matt and Mike, I really got nothing to do. Like I'm just super bored all day. I have nothing to do. What we get is the opposite extreme. We say, I'm so busy, I don't have time to implement search. I'm so busy, I can't do value adds or raise my fees. And Micah, when we push back on them, we say, hey, how can you be that busy? They say, well, Micah, this literally came up just the other day. Micah, You don't understand. We do real financial planning. We do real estate planning, and that takes time that you, my friend, cannot understand.
And I love it when those comments come up, right? Well, they do believe that true in the heart of hearts, but just think about the narcissistic comment that really is that you're in a group of other advisors and none of them, pale. They all pale in comparison to your mighty process that you go and do because you're so superior in your way of financial planning, which, hey, that's one way to approach it. Another way to look at it when someone else is doing something is saying, hey, what one thing are they doing or what one thing do they know that I don't know? Well, the reality is most of the time they don't know a technical thing that you really don't know that's transforming their practice. It's they're doing something you are choosing not to do. Now, you may choose not to do it because you're diminishing it and saying that could never make a difference in my practice. That little thing doesn't actually matter. You could diminish it because you could say, you know what, that's too easy to solve my problems. Or you could diminish it because saying I'm too busy to do all of these things, right? So there's so many ways we could kick out these ideas that coming in, but you've got to put the hard brakes on when you want to grow and say, hey, I need to get out of my comfort zone. I need to start doing something that maybe I haven't done before. And maybe it's a little simpler than I thought it was.
Yeah, this is a great kickoff for doing the really hard work versus doing lazy work. Now, Coach Joe Lucas, who you and I both have an immense amount of respect for, does great work. He talks about that there is nothing in our job as financial advisors that is physically demanding, right? We are not roofing out in 100-degree temperature. We're not laying bricks. We're not digging ditches. We're not even running equipment. We're barely using our hands. In fact, if the interface got a little bit better, I could just look. So nothing we do is physically demanding, but the difference between very successful advisors and everyone else is doing the hard thing. So in your example, Micah, the lazy thing is to say, well, I do real financial planning, and that's why it takes me so much time. The really hard thing is to say, Micah, please tell me more about your process. What can I learn from your that's hard. It's hard on the ego. It's easier on the ego to say, well, like Micah, you just don't really understand. The hard thing on the ego is that's really interesting. Our process takes a lot longer than that. Could you help me understand how you do it so quickly? Now, you may in fact discover that your process is in fact immensely superior somehow, or you might discover the really hard thing, which is, maybe I was doing it the wrong way all along.
How many times, especially on a BD world, have you gone to a conference, you looked at the people on the platform, and all those people on the platform, you're like, well, I could make that much money too if I wasn't taking care of my clients. I can make this money too if I didn't want to do these things, right? And you start just lobbing these shots at these people that are successful. And sure, you're going to have the one-offs that are there, but the vast majority of those advisors have just figured out how to do hard things. Now, they make hard things look easy, and that's really is a way of looking at it, right? Because if you do hard things long enough, they become habits, they become natural, and you make them look easy. That doesn't take away from the fact that there are hard things for new people to do.
Yeah, it really is. Of course, that's a lot of where our imposter syndrome comes from, right? Even internally, we say, that really wasn't that difficult to write that one-page financial plan or to do that onboarding. Does not diminish the value. Mike, another example of hard things that come to mind, I mentioned this before we hit record, which is I noticed the other day that I was listening to a lot of audiobooks, not fiction audiobooks, like strictly for entertainment value. And there's a place for that, right? There's a place for entertainment, but it was going from an intentional exercise of let me enjoy some entertainment time to let me get back to this audiobook because the plot line is really interesting. Now, again, there's merits to audiobooks and it's better form of entertainment than other things, but it wasn't moving me closer to my goals. It was the easy, lazy thing to do. I could kick back, I could listen to the audiobook. I didn't have to put thought into it. Versus I switched over and I was listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast with Derek Sivers. Like, oh man, here are things I need to do. And it's getting my mind going. It's getting me excited. It's pushing the envelope. So it's a small example of the easy path versus the hard path.
You know, an example that came up this past week,
Please.
somebody asked me, it was a shooting coach that we had, and he was asking me, he says, Micah, do you know why Ferrari doesn't advertise on TV? And I paused and thought about it because he was over at our house. I said, because successful people don't watch TV. And he's like, yeah, their customers don't watch TV. Right. And so they don't want to be in a place that their customers aren't. Now, you could say, well, that's not true or this and that, blah, blah, blah. But you got to look at the aspect of it, right? People that are buying Ferraris, more than likely, this isn't their primary vehicle, right? This isn't the car, the family vehicle, right? They have multiple vehicles that are there. This is going to allude to either they're really good at leveraging things and being massive in debt. That is an option. Or they're successful, right? And they can afford multiple cars. And those people aren't choosing, those people are choosing not to spend time in front of the TV doing nothing. Again, with the audiobook thing, there's a time and a place for it. You know, I love a good movie as well, but I'm not doing it every single night. I'm not doing it in lieu of my production. I'm not doing it in lieu of my PD, right? My professional development, and always making sure I'm pushing those things. So where are you being intentional with your time? Now, you could think, man, that's not very complicated. And you're right. It isn't complicated.
It's not.
But it's hard. At the end of the day, when you haven't got your PD stuff done and you need to go back and read, in the morning when you get up, are you really doing your morning success ritual? Or are you copping out because you didn't have a good night of sleep?
Yep, that's a great example. So a quick shout out to Paul Bradley, who's watching this live stream. Paul says, change, especially when abandoning core beliefs is hard. Now, that's a great example, right? The easy thing, the lazy thing is to say, hey, I've always done it this way. I've always been a discount advisor. I've always done 100-page financial plans, whatever it is, I've always done it this way. Changing that, that's a hard thing because in a sense, and this is where you have to hack your mindset, in a sense, you're telling yourself, that version of me was doing it wrong. And that's where I think we get hung up, Micah. We say that version of me was wrong. And if I change, then I'm betraying that version of me. The other way to look at that is to say, I found a better way. The way I was doing it was the best way I knew how to do it at that time. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. Right. I have now found a better way. Same when you're changing fees with clients or going to surge meetings or changing investment philosophies. This was the best way. We have found a better way.
Yeah, that's it, right? About how are you always improving it? How are we always growing with everything? Would you always do tax planning the same way no matter what? Well, tax laws change, so that sounds a little silly, right? So if you're always recommending clients that says, hey, great news, we can do a Roth conversion, and if you don't like it, we can recharacterize it into next year. Well, that's not the law anymore, so I hope you're not doing that tax planning option, right? Because that changed a long time ago. Same concept here. Tax laws change. We got to change how we're doing our tax planning. Guess what? Other things change as well. We learn new things. We delve new things. We have to implement new things. So we're always improving. So Jarvis, what's another good sign that someone is being lazy, that they're playing office, and how do we fight against that?
Yeah, boy, the one that comes to mind, Micah, that just screams at me is if you don't know what the hard thing is you need to do today or this week, you're avoiding it. Right. So a real key of playing office is the whole point of playing office is to keep you from doing the hard things, right? Like that's why we play office. That's why we check the Wall Street Journal. That's why we're on Twitter, whatever it is we're doing, because we're trying to avoid the hard things. And we get so good at avoiding the hard things that we've pushed them completely from our mind and we can't even think, like we really can't think of any hard things to do. We sit down in our chair and we say, I don't really have that much to do today. I guess I'll play around in Money Guide Pro. Like, why not? But if we the week before say, hey, I got to call 10 COIs this week. I need to follow up on 10 prospects. We talked a few weeks ago. I need to follow up on everybody who's going to come to my workshop, right? Those are the hard things. Setting those aside in advance, that will make all the difference.
Yeah, it really does. Those are so many important things you got to do. And this isn't about finding hacks to things, right? So often we reach for, we got to find a hack for this, we got to find a solve for this, etc. Sometimes it's just about rolling up your sleeves and saying, you know what, I'm going to do time blocking. Now, in my mind, time blocking actually is a hack, but it takes work to get that done. It's not an easy button and pill to do. Sometimes it's saying, hey, great, not only got to create a process, I have to follow my processes. And I find so many advisors, Jarvis, they're waiting to find the perfect process so they can implement. They'll run into something and they say, hey, I'm having this problem with my office. And Micah, how do you solve it? I say, great. And I show them exactly how we're solving it. They're like, well, that process wouldn't work for us because that third step out of 12, that third step we don't actually do. So I got to go find a different process. But just change the third step. right? It's like, what are you doing here? But all of a sudden, we don't want to follow these processes that are successful and that work. Another one is only working with clients that you add value to. And this sounds easy, but how easy is it for us to say yes all the time to people? Because we're pleasers, right? We got into this to help people, to help them grow, to help do all these things. And it's so easy to say yes to everybody, even though we're not delivering the most value we could because they're not a client that we can help the most. How often do you do that?
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's a main thing. Another thing that's hard to do is avoid cheap dopamine. Avoiding cheap dopamine, right?
Ooh.
So this comes in the form of alerts of any sort. This comes of instant messages. This is, hey, got a second? This is emails, right? We get cheap dopamine shots from that, and that is hard to resist.
Yep.
And it feels much better, and it's much more satisfying short term to say, well, let me get these alerts, and do my team members have anything to do? Those things are all very satisfying emotionally in the short term. The hard thing is to say, I will not do any internal emails for my team. I will not get any messages from my team unless the building is on fire. I will not get any pop-ups and alerts other than the alert reminding me that I have a meeting in 10 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever interval you want there. Short of that, even on your phone, when I sit down to work, I have to put it in focus mode, in that do not disturb mode, because even though I don't have alerts on anything, I still get text messages from friends. And the easy thing to do is, oh, I wonder what Micah texted me. Like, oh my goodness, this will be so much fun. I can stop doing the hard stuff and I can look at whatever the latest meme is. Nope. The hard thing to do, phone on do not disturb the entire day. Focus on what matters.
Yeah, and just set up just recurring so the phone automatically turns on and off D&D, so you don't got to think about it. It's one less chore that you have to do. You know, where are you at with getting off of social media? I say this as we're broadcasting live to LinkedIn, so I do find the irony in that. But, you know, get off social media. Like, what are you doing on there? Is it an intentional business behavior that we're doing? And no, playing on social media is not an intentional business behavior, by the way. Sorry about that one. But more than likely, you're just playing office with things. So what are you doing? Now, again, everyone likes a little playing office time, including me. Are you doing it after you've gotten the hard things done? Have you stopped being lazy with it? Saying, great, when I get X amount of things done, at the end of the day, I'm going to spend 15 minutes on social media, set a timer, and then you're done with it. Or how often are you just doom scrolling and sucking away your time?
Boy, another example that comes to mind, and I recently listened to the audiobook, and I forget the name. It's Networking with Millionaires. The guy that wrote the book, The Millionaire Next Door, he did a follow-up called Networking with Millionaires. You have to listen to the audiobook because it's an interview with him. It's very good. But he talked about how many professionals just hang out with other professionals in their own field. Financial advisors, accountants, insurance agents, whoever it is. They just go to conferences. They just hang out. Why? Because it's really easy. It's really easy and it's fun, especially if you have some small level of success. You can pat each other on the back. You can complain. You can bemoan compliance and regulatory stuff, and not a dang thing gets done. And his point, which I heartily agree with, is spend all your time outside of your field. You're not going to get business from fellow financial advisors, and you're probably not even going to learn that much in that study. He said, hey, spend all your time around people that aren't like you, people that you want as prospective clients. That is hard to do. It's hard to be the only financial advisor in a group of doctors because you're the odd man out or the odd woman out, right? The easy thing is, let me go to another industry conference. Let me just pat myself on the back and not get anything done.
Yeah, I think that's such a solid point. How do you diversify your time a little bit more, right? Getting out and doing another hard thing. All right, so what's another hard thing to do? Getting out of the office at a certain time every day. It says, great, however much time you're in the office, let's say client meetings aside, cut it in half and say you have to get everything done within a certain amount of time. One of the things, Jarvis, that I love about this, and maybe this goes into the hack category, but what I love about this is it's a very hard thing. It forces me to only do the things I have to do. If I have a very limited time to be able to work, then I got to do the things I got to do. Like you and I on this podcast, right? We do an hour for the podcast. Only takes us about 30 minutes to do it. And generally we wrap up right at the end of an hour, right? Because we get online, we start BSing, we start playing Office. We justify that just, we're creating content. But we're just really kind of playing Office for 15, 20 minutes. And they're like, holy crap, we better get to work. And then we get to work and we produce the podcast and we're done in that time period. So how do you tighten those up when you know you're not reliable for getting a lot of things done? You got to give yourself less time to get those things done.
Yeah, and I want to stress here for our listeners that this isn't necessarily about beating yourself up, right? So another easy thing to do, lazy thing to do, is get into the should category. Well, hey, Micah said I should leave at 5, and if I was a better No. This is about that I could and I choose to, right? So, hey, I should be on time for my meetings. No, I choose to be on time for my meetings, or I choose not to be on time for my meetings. And so this isn't saying, hey, have no fun. This isn't saying don't go to work. This isn't saying, adapt a stoic lifestyle and only wear rough clothing, right? This is saying be very intentional, because at the end of the day, that is the hardest thing to do, to be intentional. We live in a reactive world. I mean, our ancestors always have, right? Our ancestors that were farmers, they were reactive to the weather, right? They had no choice. We have this luxury of we can be insanely proactive, insanely intentional, but it's hard to do.
Now, this is going to go a little bit beyond just what you're doing too, about what your team is, right? The greatest gift, this from Evan Carmichael, the greatest gift you can give your team is your standards. What standards are you expecting? What standards are you setting up for them as well? And if they see you playing office, they see you not getting your things done, they see you not being intentional, guess what? That's the environment that you're creating for them. Then you start complaining that your team is not being productive. Well, and you're like, but I pay them. Yeah, but the standards you set isn't to get stuff done. The standards you set was to play office, and they're just copying what you're doing. How could you expect anything less? This could also go to the same with your children as well, right? What standards are we setting right there? So how do you go back through and say, hey, what are the standards that I want my team to have? And then maybe are those the standards that I need to start incorporating in myself, whether it's being on time to meetings. It's funny we have to mention that, but we do. Being on time to meetings, getting things done in advance, not being reactive, but being proactive to things, getting good Calendly set up, following processes, not saying yes to everything. How do you be really good at saying no? I had a meeting with my team because I got a new EA, so we're working out on calendars and whatnot. And she really likes to, if a meeting is outside of my normal meeting times, she likes to ring me. Well, not ring me, but she posted it in our chat. It says, Micah, this person would like to meet with you at 3:00 on Friday. Is that okay? Yeah, that look right there, Jarvis. That was my look too. And in her mind, a normal meeting day is 8 to 5 because that's where she came from. So why can't I meet with somebody at 3:00 on a Friday? It's like blowing her mind. That's right there. And I said, you know what? I have weird rules. And to include one of them is I don't take meetings on Sunday morning at 2 a.m. I know that's weird, right? And yeah, so everybody laughs just like that one. But it's like, this is a rule and I have to stick to it. So when she messages it or when it comes up in our meeting, it's like, no, my answer is no. I don't even address the question because I got to get my standards in place that the team follows the process no matter what. And if I am acquiescing to the team going around the process, I'm creating the problem. Again, this isn't easy. This is hard stuff.
Yeah, great comment from Jacqueline, who's watching us live. And Jacqueline, thanks for joining us. She says, if you never say no, your yes becomes meaningless. That's really an interesting point. And the yeses are so easy to give out. Mike, as you talked about your team, this is where the yeses come in as well. The easy path is to say yes to everything. Like, hey, if you want it, the meeting starts at 8 and you show up at 8:05 or 8:07, 8:10, the easy thing is to say it's not a big deal. The hard thing is to say, and again, Evan Carmichael, who we recently met with, at 8:01, he's off the call. Literally when the clock, he's down there 5 minutes ahead. When the clock hits 8:01, he's off. No questions. That's a hard thing to do. You're taking a hard line. You're coming across as a jerk. You're creating other things that you're going to have to deal with. Like, hey, if I have an employee who's not showing up to meetings, I'm going to have to reprimand them. I'm going to have to fire them. Like, you're pulling on a thread that's going to have consequences. That is not easy to do. Go ahead, Micah, please.
Oh, I want to pull on that one because I talked to my team about that one the other day. I said, hey, I met with this guy and this is what he said. He was 1 minute. If you're 1 minute late, then he's out. They're like, well, for clients, it's like, no, not for clients. When people are paying you, it's a little bit of a pass. But for team members. And they were really kind of taken back on it. They said they initially felt this was very rude. I said, okay, well, let's pull on that one just a little bit.
Pull on a thread.
If we have a team meeting and there's 10 of us and we're not starting the meeting because one person is 5 minutes late, or when that person who's 5 minutes late does start, we have to recap the entire meeting. Who's being more rude? Us for not allowing you in the room, or you for wasting all of our times for 15 minutes? Like which one is it? Because I think it can really only be one of those two options, right? You're choosing not to be on time. That means you're choosing to be disrespectful to everyone else's time for this meeting, that your time is more valuable. Is this really the standard you want to set?
Yeah, we could even do the math on that one, right? So 10 people, 5 minutes. You've wasted an hour of productivity so you can be 5 minutes late. This goes to another hard thing. It's a hard thing. Mike, you and I call it kind of a guided discovery when we're working with team members or family members, whoever. Like, I need you to kind of see this, but if I just say, hey, this thing is blue, it's not going to have the same impact. Just like your team thing, you can just say, hey, listen, from now on, I'm going to hang up all meetings at 8:01. And that is an option. That's a way to go. It's been kind of the easy, like the dictatorial way. Instead, you said, hey, listen, let's kind of walk through this and let's talk about a stranger in uniform, this Evan Carmichael guy, and let's talk about the impacts of this. That's a hard thing to do. And and I know, Micah, I don't want to speak for you. It's not exactly a lot of fun. Like, can I just say, like, hey, listen, be on time or go work somewhere else and let's just call it a day. That would be easy. The hard thing is let me guide to discovery. Let's take our process through. And then I have to hold to that standard. If I say 8:01 meetings end, the next time a meeting has to end at 8:01.
And that's really, really important, right? Because we're setting up this for success. And again, if we're choosing to be, here's my concern. So this is just my head trash here, and someone's welcome to push back on me. If we're willing to be late on our internal meetings, what does that mean to client meetings? You have an 8 o'clock meeting with a client. When do you call them? 8:07? Right. And Jarvis, you and I talked about this. Our clients will joke that they could set their clocks by when we call them. I am watching the time. I'm looking at it. And when it goes from 7:59 to 8 o'clock, I hit dial. And I'm calling them right on that time because that's what we do. And in fact, this works out so well. I was calling one client a couple of times, and about 3 minutes in, I'd called them twice and they weren't able to pick up. They called the office back 3 minutes later. And they were like, hey, Micah always calls right on time. He hasn't called. There must be something wrong in the communication. Sure enough, they got a new phone and they just didn't tell us the new number. So we were calling the old one. And so little things that had changed, right? But clients now know so much that we call right on time, they can easily spot something and help us to be successful because we've given them our standards.
Funny thing related to that, since we're all doing more virtual meetings, and as you may know, may recall, so Colleen, our office manager, she gets on with me 5 minutes early before the Zoom meeting starts, and that way we can have the waiting room. And then when the client comes on, inevitably they come on a few minutes early. I mute my camera and microphone, and then she has our small talk like she would if they were in the physical office, maintains that relationship. But let's say the meeting's at 8. At exactly 8 o'clock, if the client's not already in the Zoom room, we're dialing. Colleen is dialing their house to make sure, again, not because we're trying to ride their case, but we want them to know that 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock. When you mentioned 8:07, I got nauseous. Like the idea of being 7 minutes late to a call, I'm like, I'm going to throw up on the podcast here.
Yeah, those are things that we really got to watch for, right? Really important that we're doing. So being on time could be one. When do meetings end as well, right? This is another one. How do you wrap things up inside of internal team meetings? How do you set things when they're supposed to get done? Do you hold your team accountable? Are you accountable to anyone on your team to get things done? Here's one thing that I just know about myself. If it's just, you know what, I could get this done this week or next week, I'm probably going to put it off and I'm not going to get it done unless it's, some new thing that I want to play with. But if I'm accountable to my team members and I say, hey, Tori, next Tuesday, we're going to be talking at 8 a.m. and I'm going to have this thing done. Well, then next Tuesday at 8 a.m., I'm going to have the thing done. Now, it might be done at 7:30 right before that, but I'm going to have it done by 8 o'clock because I need to be accountable to my team and show them that I'm getting my things done. And I expect the same in return. Again, these are the hard things that you have to do. And when a team member doesn't get things done, you got to call them on the carpet. And you don't got to do it and be in a total jerk about it. Done that one, wasn't as productive. But just saying, hey, this was what was supposed to be done. This was the deadline. Am I mistaken? This is what I written down in my notes. You were supposed to have this done by now. Was I incorrect in that? Or is there something else I need to know? Right? Now, this could be a good thing because maybe something did change that you missed. And if not, okay, why isn't it done? Okay, great. This is not okay. It's not done on time. What do we need to do to correct this to make sure it gets done first? And then how do we make sure it gets done on time next time? I don't got to braid them over the coals or publicly shame them, but I got to have a difficult conversation with them because it's important that our team members get stuff done when it's expected.
Yeah, it's very, very rare that it's malicious or nefarious or some kind of gross, violation by a team member's thing. It's just a series of mistakes happen and it got us to this point. And by addressing it, just like with kids, right? It's really not any different. That's not disrespectful to team members. We have to say, hey, here is the standard. And out of love for your kids, out of professional courtesy for your coworkers, I am going to hold you to the standard. And that's another one of those hard things. I will hold you to that standard, and I need you to hold me that standard as well. Mike, another place I see this hard things versus easy things, it is very easy just to add another team member. Now, not necessarily easy as in finding them and onboarding them and training them and buying them technology. Like, oddly enough, that part's really hard. But for whatever reason in our mind, and we ran into advice the other day, he already had a lot of team members. And he says, well, you know what I really need is I need to hire 2 more people. 2 more people to do what? To babysit the other people, to have one more person not adhering to standards? No. The hard thing you need to do is get rid of 2 team members, let Parkinson's law streamline your operations, and then we can reassess. But for whatever reason, hiring another team member, heaven forbid hiring a junior advisor, somehow falls in our mind of this will be the easy way out. I won't have to prospect anymore. I won't have to do financial plans. I won't have to do surge meetings. All I need to do is hire one more person and my problems will be solved.
I love it. Jarvis, Amber says we have a question from one of the attendees. What happens when clients don't join calls on time? And that leaves you less time to go over the agenda. Hey, if our call is at 8:30, our call ends at 9:30. My phone calls are 1 hour. If a client is 15 minutes late for whatever reason, then you're 100% correct. I only have 45 minutes to go through the agenda. So that's one of the things I'm going to talk to them about, like get them connected. More than likely something happened in order to make this disconnect, but I am going to make sure I mention it and says, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Client, your time is really important to me. I know we have to get off the call at 9:30 to be respectful of your time. What are the top things you want to make sure that we're discussing today? Then I'm going to run my normal agenda as I normally do, but knowing I might have to truncate some things or maybe have to put some things off, but my meeting still ends at 9:30. It's that 1 hour slot. If the client's 15 minutes late, that means I got 45 minutes to get my job done.
Yeah, it has to be because where else is that time going to come from? I'm in Surge, so I've got another meeting behind it. Great forcing mechanism. And Micah, going with your assumption that something came up, legitimate reason to be there's a one-time thing. For me, it doesn't strike me any different than if the client comes in and they have some major life event that they weren't ready for. That wasn't in my agenda. Hey, we just found out that our adult son has stage 4 cancer. Cool. Everything that was on my agenda now needs to get set to the side, and we need to take care of that. So my agenda is already very flexible. You and I joke, especially at the beginning of Surge, I come in with 3 hours worth of material, right? Because I'm just in my head, I'm worried I'm not going to have any value to deliver. I come in with 3 hours and I whittle it down to 45 minutes. And that's just how it's going to go. A client that's habitually late, now we're back to hard things of a client that's not a good client. This is now somebody that needs to be graduated. If they don't have enough professional respect to you to be on time. Now, they don't need to adhere to our standard of 8 o'clock is 8 o'clock, right? If it's 8:01, 8:03, you can give some leeway. But somebody who doesn't respect you as a professional cannot be a client.
Yeah, I have somebody who is habitually 5 minutes late to every meeting, but we always end on time. And so it's one of the conversations that we had. His wife's there, so we kind of get some stuff done in advance. Then he always comes in a little bit later because he's a doctor. And so I don't know why he can't tell the time. So, interesting things. But it's just a conversation that we had between Bob and Sue. It was like, hey, I'm happy to keep working with you because it was one of his comments of saying, hey, I was a little bit late, but we got to get all this stuff done. I was like, no, it's not how this works. I was like, this is the only time that I have, and I have another client waiting, and it's rude for me to keep them waiting because you weren't here. And so it was, we just had a really frank, very positive conversation. And I was like, look, Bob, if this doesn't work for you, I totally get it. I'll support your decision to find another advisor and I'll make this as easy as possible. And his wife was like, no, that's not what we want. I said, okay, well, then this is the only format that it can work on. We're welcome to come in early. We'll get, Sue and I can take care of stuff if you come in a couple minutes late, but we're still going to leave on time. And they're great clients. We just had to have that communication. Again, if he's 30 minutes late, expecting me to go another 30 minutes past, the answer is heck no.
Yeah, totally. Well, Micah, speaking of staying on time, we try to keep these episodes to about 30 minutes. And this podcast is all about taking action, which, by the way, and not just to pat ourselves on the back, by the way, this is a hard thing to do. It's hard to end a presentation with action items. Right? It's easier to just ride off into the sunset, tell a cute joke, wish everybody happy planning. The hard thing is, which is why so few people do it, the hard thing is, here is what you will do next, right? To the prospect, here is the next step. The client, here is the next step. And for you, our podcast listeners, here is the next step. So, Micah, what is an action item you would recommend when it comes to doing the hard things versus the easy things?
Number one, you got to create forcing mechanisms. We can talk about everything else, but in my world, if you don't have a forcing mechanism, you're not going to get that done. Whether that's I'm going to book something, another meeting right afterwards to get something done, whether I have a task to do, I'm going to book a follow-up with a team member to make sure I get it done. I'm going to book a trip out of town to make sure I'm spending time with the family, right? What are all of these things? But how do I create a forcing mechanism to get these things done? That's step number one for me, Jarvis.
I love that. I'm going to say step number 2 related to that is you've got to be more intentional with your time. Now, this doesn't mean hey, self, I'm going to be more intentional with my time. This means I'm blocking into my calendar. Here is when I'm going to start, and Mike, to your point, end these things. Here's when I'm going to meet with my team, start and end time. Here's when I'm going to listen to the Perfect RIA podcast. Here's when I'm going to do these things, and they're going to be blocked out on my calendar at least a week in advance because I know that the more intentional I am, which is hard, the more successful I will be.
And the last thing, action item number 3, do what successful people are doing. Don't do what everyone else is doing, right? Yeah. Just because everyone else does A, B, and C, guess what? We're not solving for 99% of the other people in the world. We're solving for the top 1%. What do we need to do to be in the top 1% that delivers the most value to clients? The top 1% that runs the best team, where everyone has the lifestyle in which that they want in order to build, to grow, but they're still pushed in order to achieve. That's what we're solving for. So be hyper intentional in what you're solving for.
I love it. Well, thank you everyone for listening. For those of you that joined us live on LinkedIn Live, thanks a lot for joining us for this experiment. And for everyone else, until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.